Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're going to be talking about M. Night Shyamalan's latest film, Knock at the Cabin. And you know, I was extremely excited for this film because of M. Night Shyamalan, because you really never know exactly what you're going to get with one of his films. You're either going to get the greatest thing of all time, or you're going to get a complete and utter disaster that is just one of the worst films of all time. So it's a roll of the dice, it's a flip of a coin, and it's so exciting to sit in a theater and to watch an M. Night Shyamalan movie because yes, there's going to be twists and turns within the movie, but the biggest twist and turn is whether the movie's going to be good. And the reactions that I've heard coming out of the premiere of this film is either it's the best Shyamalan movie ever or it's the worst one ever, and just the polarizing aspects of his films is always so fascinating to me. And I land on the side that I really like this film. I think this film is very interesting. Its moral dilemmas are very well set up, and the differences from the book are actually fascinating. So I will be getting to spoilers for both this movie and the book. And just a little preface, I've actually not read the book. I read a little plot synopsis of what happened at the end of the book, just so I knew exactly what it was going up against after I watched this movie, because I was curious to see exactly what they changed and what they kept. And there's actually a really big difference towards the end, so I want to get into that later on in this review. So spoilers going ahead for Knock at the Cabin. So what is this film about? Well, you know, I went into this pretty blind. I only watched the teaser trailer, which basically sets up the premise of this film being this couple, Eric and Andrew, and their daughter Wen, and you have them at this cabin, and these four people show up saying that if one of them doesn't decide to sacrifice one of the others, you know, in a willing way, then the world is going to end. Everybody else on the planet will die, and those three will just wander the earth all alone with nothing else left in the world. And this movie kicks off immediately. That teaser trailer is essentially the first 15 minutes of this movie, so it just starts and it goes. So I really loved the pacing of this film, and my favorite parts of this film by far is the moral dilemmas that's set up with all of the characters involved, because of course you have Eric and Andrew and the daughter, and their moral dilemma is essentially, do we decide to sacrifice ourselves to save everybody else in the world? But the real problem is, do they believe what's actually happening on the TV? Do they believe what these four people are telling them to believe? And are they, you know, arguing with each other? Do they, you know, kind of fights between each other? Are they kind of splitting sides and one of them believes it, one of them doesn't? What is the conflict going to be here between all of these characters? And I find a lot of that fascinating. And on the opposite side of the coin, you have the four people who are, you know, telling this couple and this little girl that this is going to happen, and whether, you know, they believe it's truly or not, that's also a question within themselves. Do they start to, you know, really believe in their cause, that they're, you know, really trying to save the world, or are they starting to doubt themselves because they feel like what they're doing is not morally right? And so there's a lot of question marks on this film with all these characters, whether or not they're doing the right thing. And I find all of that fascinating from both sides of it, because I think all the performances in this film are very good. Now, it is an M. Night Shyamalan movie, so the performances are going to be that of an M. Night Shyamalan movie. I will say there's some lines, especially in the first act of this film, that is just kind of performed a little bit goofy and weird. There's some lines that are just kind of odd. But I feel like that's what we come to expect from an M. Night Shyamalan movie. We expect to see a lot of weird things. And of course he makes his cameo in this film. He shows up on the TV. He's in this weird, like, kind of like a QVC or maybe like a cooking show where they're eating fried chicken. They're talking about it. And it's just like, the scene goes on for maybe like probably about 15 to 20 seconds long, and maybe it should have only been like a 5-second long cameo, but it holds on for a very odd amount of time, and that's just M. Night Shyamalan. He holds on to the most bizarre things, and so the first act got me a little bit worried, but when he got really into the meat of all their performances, Dave Bautista in particular is so great in this movie, because he's kind of playing this really dorky and kind of reserved guy. You know, usually he's playing that loud and obnoxious character like Drax is in Guardians of the Galaxy, but I really think he is such a great actor because he can play these subtle moments in this film, and you can really see how tortured he is. You can tell that, you know, these visions that he's had of the end of the world and all the screams and all the death that he has seen in his mind has really affected him, and him walking up to this family and doing all these things to them, it really does affect him. And when he has to get serious and when he has to kind of, you know, take control of the situation, because he is a big guy, he is a physical imposing threat, he can do that really well. So he kind of balances these two sides of his character extremely well in this film, which I think this guy has such a great range as an actor. Not as a wrestler turned actor like some of the other wrestlers turned actor. He is just straight up a really great actor in this film, and I'm curious to see all the different choices that he makes further on in his career, of the roles that he takes, because he's definitely a very interesting actor to look forward to. Jonathan Groff and Ben Aldridge play Eric and Andrew in this film, and I really love them as this couple in this film because, you know, for one, they have good chemistry together as this couple, but mainly because they are kind of two opposite sides of the same coin. You have Andrew, who is more kind of dedicated to doubting the situation, to want to get out. He's the more, you know, angry, the more anger management type of person who wants to go run out to grab the gun to try to solve the situation that way to get his family out safely, whereas you have Jonathan Groff as Eric, who is kind of more willing to believe in these things, because essentially when you have these four, horsemen, essentially, as you find out, they are the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and they kind of have to sacrifice one another to kind of prevent the apocalypse from happening, kind of delay it a little bit more and a little bit more each time. And so when you have Ron Weasley, the first one to go out, and you have Eric sitting in the chair, and there's this mirror in the background, and he sees a light, and maybe he sees a figure in this light, maybe he's seeing this vision that these four people have said that they've had these visions about the end of the world. Now he's having a vision himself. Maybe he starts to believe all these crazy things that they've been saying throughout this entire film. So now you're kind of pitting this couple against each other. Now you have them kind of arguing about whether something is real or whether something's not real, and they're kind of divided on exactly what to decide with their situation. And that conflict between these two characters and the performances with these two actors are very, very convincing and very strong, and pretty much the emotional core of this film, even more than the little girl in this film. From the trailer, I thought she was going to have a bigger role in essentially deciding what exactly was going to happen in this film, but it's really based on this couple and their love for each other, and how that love is so hard to separate. Are you willing to sacrifice something that you love so much? They even say at one point that their love is so pure that is why they're chosen for this situation, which I found them very solid for these roles. And when it comes to the four horsemen of the apocalypse, they all stand for a different thing. Ron Weasley stands for malice, and of course you have nurture, played by Abby Quinn. And then you have Nikki Amuka-Bird playing the health aspect of that, because she is a nurse. And of course you have Bautista, who is the guidance type of character. And this four horsemen of the apocalypse kind of metaphor that you are introduced towards the end of the film, of course that makes so much sense. I'm shocked that I didn't get that earlier on in the film, because they are all representing the different parts of humanity very well, and every time one of them is sacrificed, those are the people who are being sacrificed around the world. And so again, the concept of this film is very solid. Now let's get into the ending of this film. So like I said, everything is real. The world is actually ending. There's this famine going on. There's these tsunamis going on. Planes are falling from the sky. Lightning is striking the planet, setting fires everywhere, killing countless amounts of people. And so when everybody has sacrificed themselves in the Four Horsemen, besides Dave Bautista, he's finally decided he's going to sacrifice himself. He's going to slit his throat, and they'll only have a few minutes to decide exactly what's going to happen. The little girl Wen runs up to the treehouse, and then you just have Eric and Andrew, who are kind of set with this decision of whether or not they're going to sacrifice each other, or whether or not they're going to walk the earth alone together as a family again. And so then you have this final scene where they're talking to each other. It's a very emotional scene. The people that I was watching the movie with, some of them actually even cried in this scene, because it is a very emotional moment. It didn't quite get me as much as I wanted it to, but still, I do think that the performances, like I said, are strong enough to hold up this moment in a very emotional way. And Eric decides to have Andrew kill him. He is going to be the one who is going to be sacrificed, and that's exactly what happens. So Andrew goes back up to the treehouse. He grabs his daughter. They drive off and see that the world has not ended for everybody. There's still going to be some survivors left on this planet, and they play that song that was played earlier in the film. This film kind of goes back and forth with some flashbacks of that relationship to kind of build, their character development, and they were listening to this song on the car ride there to the cabin, and now that song is playing once again. And so that's how the movie ends. It kind of implies that this has happened many times before. Whenever there's sort of natural disasters that's causing a lot of death around the world, that means another family was in the same predicament that our family was. Here, it's just their love was so pure that it pushed it back and back and back, and so much disaster happened because of the events of this film. So what exactly happens at the end of the book? And since I didn't actually read the book, I won't have the exact intricate details of exactly what happens in that story, but I read exactly what happened online, so I have a pretty good idea of what happened. So essentially, when Andrew runs out to the car to grab the gun, there's a struggle with the gun, and the gun goes off, and it kills one of the Four Horsemen, and it also kills Wen in the crossfire. So the daughter dies about halfway through the story, which is a massive change, because she does survive this movie, and it changes the decisions that Eric and Andrew make throughout the rest of the book. Because of the loss of their daughter and how it was an accident and not a purposeful sacrifice, the apocalypse is still going to happen, and so they're set with the decision of whether or not a second one of them is going to die to stop the world from ending, which is so much more difficult of a choice because somebody else has already died in this situation. And so the book ends not with Leonard, but with Sabrina. She's the last of the Four Horsemen who survives to the end of the film. And by the end of the film, when she sacrifices herself for the delay of the apocalypse, in those last few minutes before everything goes down, Eric and Andrew decide that their love is more important, that they stay together, and they let the world die around them. And it kind of ends a little bit ambiguously of whether or not things are really going to end in the way that it was set up to be. And again, I don't know the exact details of this, so I could be wrong with the ambiguity parts, but the way I got out of it was they kind of survived. Their love was so strong that they're going to stick together and that they're going to let the world die around them. And so this difference is actually very interesting to me, because in the book it kind of has an emphasis on, they're willing to let the world die around them in order to preserve that love that they have for each other, which is a great way for the book to end, mainly because the daughter did die earlier in the film, and that kind of informs their decisions that they make. Whereas in the movie, since the daughter does survive, it makes sense that they'd want to sacrifice themselves to be able to save the rest of the world, to give their daughter an actual future with other people without the world ending, because what world do they want to leave their daughter if they, let the world crumble around them? And so I do think that difference is entirely based upon the survival of the daughter. And so that is going to be my review for Knock at the Cabin. So I'm very curious to hear out of any book readers what you thought about the change in the ending. Did it make the movie for you? Did it break the movie for you? Are you happy that you have these two different versions to kind of go back and forth with, whether you experience the movie version or you experience the book version, or, just in general, if you only watched the movie and you haven't read the book, what did you think of the ending of the film? What did you think of the film in general? I did really enjoy it. I do think it's one of the better M. Night Shyamalan films. I don't think it's one of the best M. Night Shyamalan films. I'm kind of watching through all of them. I still really love Sixth Sense and Unbreakable the most easily out of all of his films, but I also think that The Village is underrated. I really like Splits, and of course Knock at the Cabin is now going to be up there with The Visit in his, kind of newer age films that he's had in the past few years that really did work for me. So what do you guys think? Comment down in the comment section down below, and of course subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and I'll see you all in my next one.